So we're going to read something. This is off script. Hadn't planned to read anything, but why not? أقول الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على نبينا Muhammad, page 505. So from the benefits that I really enjoy from reading the lives of the Sahaba is to match a hadith with a story. To match a hadith with a story. There's some hadith that we hear all the time, very famous hadith, but we don't know the story of the one that narrated this hadith. This Sahaba that we're going to read about right now, I'm pretty sure if you've been Muslim for a year or more, you have heard a hadith by the Sahaba, this great Sahaba. I'm pretty sure of that. You have heard a hadith by this great Sahaba, and now you get a chance to match the hadith with the story. Oh, that was him. And and it means a little more, Naam, rahmakallah. So this is the great Sahaba, may Allah Ta'ala be pleased with him, Adi ibn Haatim al-Ta'i. Adi ibn Haatim al-Ta'i. And he's on page 505. Adi ibn Haatim was a Christian. He embraced Islam the 9th year after migration, and he was firm when the people apostated. So how did he convert to Islam? Haatim, who was Haatim in relation to him? Ahsan, his father, right? Adi ibn Haatim, right? His father, right? He was the chief of the Ta'i tribe, and they was in the Najd province in the central part of Arabia. When Haatim died, his son Adi inherited the throne, right? So Adi would take a fourth of the spoils of war from his people. Don't forget that point. He would take a fourth of the spoils of war from his people, as was the custom of the Arab rulers during that time. When the dawah of Islam spread, Adi became afraid, and he said to a young boy from his subjects, "Bring me the fastest camel you have. Bring me the fastest camel you have. And if you hear of an army of Muhammad is near our border, inform me immediately." What's he going to do? He's going to leave, right? So the young boy came one day and said, "Oh, my king, an army is approaching, and I have been told it is the army of Muhammad." Adi said, "Then bring the camel I asked you for, and gather my family. I will flee to Sham and live under the Christians because they follow my religion." Adi was what religion? Christian. He said, and as he was on the path to Sham, they noticed the sister of Adi was left behind in the village. Right? They gathered everybody, but they forgot the sister. Right? He said, and there was no way they could return to retrieve her, so they proceeded on to Sham. And they lived in Sham among the fellow Christians, while his sister was taken as a captive by the Muslims when they invaded the village of Adi. So the captives were placed near the masjid, so they could hear the prayer and the call to prayer. And one day the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed by the sister of Adi, and she stood and said, "O Messenger of Allah, my father is dead, and my guardian is missing. Set me free, may Allah be gracious to you." And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Who is your guardian?" She said, "Adi ibn Haatim." And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Adi, the one who fled from Allah and his messenger?" And then he walked away. So from this we gain a benefit, is that the prisoners of war, they were able to talk to the head leader, right? They were able to talk to the main person in charge. And they, and it wasn't like any type of torturous type of environment, because she's speaking directly with him, right? So the next day, he came by her and she said the same thing, right? The third day when he walked past her, she didn't say anything. And there was a man standing behind the Prophet ﷺ, and he motioned to her to stand up, right? The first day he came by, she asked to be set free. He gave the response. The second day, same response. The third day, she didn't say anything. She gave up hope. There was a man walking behind the Prophet ﷺ, and he motioned to her, "Get up, say something," right? And so she stood up and she said, "Oh, Messenger of Allah, my father is dead. My guardian is missing. Set me free. May Allah be gracious to you." And the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, "I agree." But he had a condition. He said, "But do not leave in haste until you find someone trustworthy to take you to your brother." right? So he was trying to make sure that she was good, right? When she asked about the man that was standing behind the Prophet ﷺ, who and told her to stand up, they said his name was Ali ibn Abi Talib. May Allah Ta'ala be pleased with him. So when she found some people from her tribe, the Prophet ﷺ gave her some clothes, some wealth, and a camel to ride. Look at Islam, right? Naam, and she headed towards Sham. When the sister of Adi arrived to him in Sham, Adi asked her concerning the Prophet ﷺ. She said to him, I think by Allah that you should join him quickly. If he is a prophet, the one who hastens towards him will enjoy his grace. And if he is a king, then you will not be disgraced in his sight while you are as you are. So Adi immediately prepared for travel. Right now he's in Sham. Now he's got his sister, he's in Sham. He doesn't have to go back. But his sister advised him to go back, right? Advice from the women is good, right? So we don't discount the women. The women are smart. Sometimes they have some very good advice, right? So he set off to Medina to meet the Prophet ﷺ without any security and not any letter. Naam. And he said because he had heard that the Prophet ﷺ said, I certainly wish that Allah would place the hand of Adi in my hand. So he had already heard that the Prophet ﷺ had wanted him to come back and embrace Islam. Right? So Adi said, I went up to him while he was in the masjid. And I greeted him. And he said, who is this man? I said, I'm Adi ibn Haatim. And so he stood up for me. Look at this etiquette. He stood up for me, took me by the hand, and set off towards his home. By Allah, this is who talking right now? Adi. He's narrating the story, right? He says, by Allah, as he was walking with me towards his house, a weak old woman met him with her young child. She stopped him again, talking to him about a problem she had. And as he was attending to her needs, I said to myself, by Allah, this is not the behavior of a king. Right? Why? Because he was humble and talking to the regular people. Right? He then took me by the hand and went with me until we reached his home. There he got a leather cushion filled with palm fiber and gave it to me and said, sit on this. Adi said, I felt embarrassed. And I said, no, you sit on it. He said, no, this is for you to sit on. And so I went ahead and sat on it, and he sat on the floor because he didn't have another cushion. Right? And I said to myself, this is not the behavior of a king, and this is not the home of a king. Because the Prophet ﷺ, his home was very humble, right? So he said that the Prophet ﷺ said to me, Adi, Islam, accept Islam, and you will be safe. Safe means like in the hereafter. Because he's already good, he's in Sham, but no, you be safe from the fire. Adi didn't give in that easy, right? He replied, I already have a religion. And his religion was what? The Prophet ﷺ said, I know more about your religion than you do. And he said, the Prophet ﷺ said, are you not from the, and this, Amrukhishiyah, and this is a sect between the Christians and the Sabians. And when you go to war, you take 1/4 of your people's spoils. Remember that? And is this not prohibited in your religion? Adi said, you're right. Indeed, you are correct. Adi said, at this moment, I knew he was a prophet sent by Allah because he was more knowledgeable of our affairs as we were ignorant of. So the Prophet ﷺ said, I know what is preventing you from accepting Islam. You think that the only people to follow this religion are the oppressed people who have no strength. Oh Adi, have you heard of Al-Hira, a city in Iraq? And Adi said, I said, I have not seen it, but I've heard of it. The Prophet ﷺ said, I swear by the one who has my soul in his hand, Allah will complete this affair until a woman travels from Al-Hira to make tawaf around the Kaaba without fearing anyone. Meaning that the Muslims are going to run this whole area. Right now the Muslims are weak, so he was like, well, I don't want to become a Muslim because they don't have the strength in that. He was telling him, before it's all said and done, the Muslims are going to be in complete control. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, oh Adi, perhaps what prevents you from entering Islam is the poverty of the Muslims. I swear by Allah, I swear by the one who has my soul in his hand, the treasures of Khusro will be seized. And Adi said, the treasures of Khusro? Like, come on now, like that's far-fetched. Like, this was a major man in what country? Persia, right? And they were like the superpowers, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, yes, Khusro. He said, and money will be spent until no one will accept it. I mean, they have so much wealth, right? One of the scholars was making a wonderful point about how back in the day, the superpowers were Rome and Persia, right? They were like the superpowers. And the Arabs, if you know the Arabs back in that day, they were insignificant. So some of the tribes, they would get under Persia, some of them would get under Rome, and some of them would, you know, just be off on their own, but they were like very insignificant. And by Islam, them following this book and the Sunnah, they overcame both of those superpowers. He said, so what is going to overcome Russia and America? People are worried about Russia and America. We've been through this before. This already happened before. Just follow the book and the Sunnah. That's it. Nothing new, right? Now, he said, the churches of Khusro, the Prophet ﷺ said, yes, and money will be spent until no one will accept it. Upon hearing this, Adi embraced Islam. Adi lived a long life, and he said, indeed, I have lived to see two affairs mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ come to pass, and the third will surely happen as well. He said, I was part of the cavalry that descended upon the treasures of Khusro, and we seized them. And I have seen a woman leaving Al-Hira on her camel, fearing nothing until she arrived at the Kaaba. He said, and Allah Ta'ala calls the third prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ to come to pass also during the Khalif of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, when wealth flowed amongst the Muslims so much that when the town cry went out to the people and said, we have sadaqah, we have zakat, no one came out. Right? Now, let's get to some, all right. Now his father, Haatim, was known for being very generous before Islam. So Adi said to the Messenger of Allah, ﷺ, he said, my father used to uphold the ties of kinship and do such and such. And the Prophet ﷺ said, meaning that he was saying, okay, will my father get paradise? He was very generous. He did this and that. And he said, your father wanted something, and he got it. Does anybody know what his father wanted? What was that? He wanted to be famous. He's famous. He got exactly what he wanted, right? Nah, exactly okay. Nah. Adi lived to be 120 years old. He said, since I embraced Islam, the Aqamah for the prayer has never been called except I have been in a state of wudu. Right? Now, let's mention some of these narrations. And if you never heard them before, I'm going to be surprised, right? When the verse was sent down, and eat and drink until the white thread of dawn becomes distinct to you from the black thread. Adi said, I took a rope, a black rope and a white rope, and I put them beneath my pillow, and I started to look at them during the night, but I could not see any distinction between the two. The next morning, I went to the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, and I told him about that. And he said, it is the blackness of the night and the whiteness of the day. Anybody heard that hadith before? That's the man who's doing it, right? Adi, Allah Ta'ala pleased with him. He said, I came to the Prophet ﷺ, and I had a gold cross around my neck. He said, oh, Adi, remove the idol from your neck. So I removed it from my neck and threw it down. And then he recited, the Jews and Christians took their rabbis and monks to be their lords besides Allah. He said, I said, O Messenger of Allah, we did not worship them. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, did they not make impermissible that which Allah made permissible, and you follow them in that? And did they not make permissible that which Allah Ta'ala had made haram, and you follow them in that? I said, certainly. He said, this is your worship of them. Anybody heard the hadith before? This is the man who was involved in it, right? One more. If you never heard this hadith before, let me know. Adi ibn Haatim, he said, I heard the Messenger of Allah ﷺ say, ittaqun nar or bi shaqq tamr. Protect yourself from the fire even with half a date. Heard that before? This is the man. Right? So that's another joy I get from that. These hadith that we heard our whole Islamic life. Oh, that's who narrated the hadith? He went through all that and it You know, it's like putting a name with a face, right? You put a story with a hadith. Now, may Allah Ta'ala be pleased with our noble companions and allow us to conversate with them in paradise. No. Huh? Yeah. He's a former king. And there are other kings too. It's another king in this book too that you're going to read about. It's men in this book. I'm not going to tell you who they are. You have to go through and find yourself to make sure you read the book. I'm not going to read the whole book for you. And I know you don't want me to. There's a man in this book who his grandfather is more famous than he is. And he's a Sahabah. His grandfather got a flock of elephants and was going to destroy the Kaaba. He's in the book. There's a man in this book whom Jibreel alayhi salam took his form. There's a man in this book who Iblis took his form. Two different people. The one who Iblis took his form, Abu Muhammad mentioned his name a couple nights ago. His name was, I already said I wasn't going to tell you. Find out by yourself, right? There is a person, a companion mentioned in this book who had the body of a snake. Why is that? It was a jinn. Jinn had the body of a snake. There were several jinn inside this book. Several jinn. One of the jinn, the Prophet ﷺ, they were out in an area and they heard a shaitan, a big devil, reciting poetry against the Prophet ﷺ. So this jinn volunteered to go take care of him. You know what I meant by take care of him, right? The poetry stopped. Right? Never to be heard again. Right? So there are jinn inside of this book. And Ibn Hajar, he said, there's no doubt that the jinn, because we have Surah al-Jinn, that heard from the Prophet ﷺ and believed in him, they are from the Sahabah and they deserve the same respect as the Sahabah from the men do. In the book about the woman companion, it's a jinn from amongst the women mentioned in the book, who was buried by Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, right? The Khalif. He found her on the side of the road and he thought it was just a snake. And he buried the snake. See? Just being a man, just being kind. He saw a snake bleeding on the side of the road. He felt sorry for the snake. He grabbed some leather, and now this right here's in the book about the women. He buried the snake, right? And then when he went inside the masjid, a group of jinn came to him, and they said, "Which one of you buried our companion?" And found out that he had buried one of the Sahaba, right? Nah, so just encourage the brothers to just enjoy the book with your family and learn about these salaf, and we have the intention that we want Allah Ta'ala to unite us with these great people in the hereafter. Nah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Muhammad.